Okay. Hello, everyone. Hello. Hello, Pak Stephen. Yeah, Stephen Law. Hello. Okay, before we start our discussions today, I want to share a bit about the conditions of throughout this maybe around 6 or 7 months here in Indonesia about how philosophy is getting some attention more and more in Indonesia. So, Stephen, sorry, we want to share about how philosophy getting more attention around this maybe 5 or 6 months. Yeah, we see there are a lot of philosophy hubs, some collective of communities who share or try to disseminate philosophy in the public sphere, and it's really encouraging us to do more and more to invite a lot of philosophers like you, and we have in some months in next months we have Philip. Also we have and the other philosophers, and we have Christian Miller some weeks ago, and it is really encouraging us to make philosophy more and more accessible here in Indonesia publicly. And we here as Schole Indonesia, we are a collective philosophy hub who want to share philosophy in a more leisure way, in a more easier way to make it accessible to the public. So yeah, that's what we do here in Indonesia. Hopefully it could make the philosophy discourse here in Indonesia is getting better, and to make more people to getting critically to engage in the public discourse. So also, and I'm not here alone. I'm here with Reinhard. Reinhard will translate the discussions in Indonesia, and also everyone, if you guys have some questions, you could access slido and type in Humanis 14, Humanis 14, and you could give the questions there. So without any further ado, I want to start our discussion, introduce who is Stephen Law and what are his works and his writings. Okay. Reinhard, udah ada Reinhard?
Yep. Hello.
Okay. Thank you, Reinhard.
Okay.
Good. Stephen, I want to share an introductory verse, and then we'll start as soon as possible. So, hello, good morning, good evening, and good day there in UK. It is really a privilege for Schole ID to have Stephen as one of our interview in our weekly discussions. First, let me introduce Stephen, and I think I'm sure enough everyone who's here know who's Stephen Law and also his works. But yeah, I need to introduce him first. But yeah, Stephen Law, FRSA, is an English philosopher and writer in philosophy who previously worked at Trinity College, University of London, until his closure in June 2018. He also edits the philosophical journal Thing. I think it is a public journal, yeah, a journal for the public sphere, which is sponsored by the Royal Institute of Philosophy and published by the Cambridge University Press. He is a fellow of the Society of Arts and Commerce, and in 2008 became the prof of the Centre for Inquiry UK. Also, we could see that he's one from many philosophers who tries to disseminate philosophy for the public sphere, also for school. in example, he writes philosophy for AS and A-level school for UK school. Also some introductory books which I found very fun and easy to read. I have one of them, yeah. The Great Philosophers. Everyone who wants to start philosophy should read this one.
So signal is not good.
It's not good.
Let's.
Okay. Hopefully, yeah. Hopefully, it's getting better. Okay. I want to ask the first questions. Stephen, could you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Let's me turn off the video.
Yeah.
Okay. Could you hear me now?
I can now, but I'm going to move.
Okay.
So just to see if I can get a better signal. Okay.
Okay. Maybe it's my signal.
I think it might be mine.
Okay.
Let's see. Okay, we'll try this. Might be better. Okay.
Okay. So let's start. I'll give you the first questions. Okay. Could you hear me better?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Fortunately, yes, we could start our discussions. It's better for me to turn off the camera because, yeah, my connection is not good. Yeah. Okay. The first questions we always ask to every interviewee. Stephen, what makes you into philosophy for the first time, and what is philosophy for you?
Oh, well, when I was at school, I'd not heard of philosophy. I didn't know anything about it, and I left school without any A levels, which are the qualification that you would usually get before going to university. And I became a postman. So I delivered the mail, I delivered letters. But I did a lot of reading while I was a postman. It's about 4 years. And one book led to another. And eventually I found I was just reading books about philosophy. I sort of discovered philosophy through reading. And then I applied to go to university at about the age of 23, 24. Once I realized that you could actually do this stuff and think about these questions at university. So that's how I discovered it, through just reading. And then what was the other question? I've forgotten already.
What is philosophy for you?
What is it? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I suspect that it is about solving puzzles as best we can that are not really scientific puzzles. They're another kind of puzzle. They're a kind of conceptual puzzle. So if you want a solution, you need to unpack ideas and think arguments through and so on, rather than observe the world and study the world. And you can make progress and you can solve puzzles in that way, but it's a rather different activity to empirical science, physics and chemistry and so on. And the questions that it tackles are very different kinds of questions. I suppose that's my stab at answering your question.
I see. Do you still remember what is the first philosophy book that you ever read, or writings?
Oh, well, the first explicitly philosophical book was probably was either The Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, which is really about Plato,
I see.
or it was Anthony Flou's History of Western Philosophy, which I actually took on a great big 6-week trip around India. Big thick book. I thought that'll keep me busy. That'll keep me busy while I'm traveling. And it did. Yeah. And that had a big
Did it bring you to philosophy later?
Yes, well, it was one of the books that really made me think, actually, this is what I want to do. I love this stuff. I'm really passionate about it. And I would like the opportunity to think about it more, find out more about it, at university. So I applied to university and I got into university amazingly, despite the fact that I didn't have any A-levels, which are the usual requirement. I got an interview and I sort of talked my way into university. I'm not sure you could do it now. I think I was quite lucky. I think that was a time when you could just about manage to talk your way into university as a mature student. Yeah, so that's my journey. I kind of discovered it for myself. I never learned about it at school. But once I realised that you could have a career even asking questions like is this real or an illusion? How can I know anything? How do I know my parents aren't virtual? Could a robot think? These are I loved thinking about that stuff. So and questions about morality and so on. I loved thinking about these questions, and so it was an obvious thing to do to try and pursue it further at university.
I see. Okay. Still about the first questions, Stephen. You the most?
Oops,
Which philosophers?
Yeah.
Which philosophers who inspire you the most?
Oh, well, the ones I've probably spent most time on would be Wittgenstein, the later philosophy, the stuff in philosophical investigations, for example. It's quite hard to read, to be honest. It's not easy, not easy to read, but there's some really good, interesting stuff in there. I still spend time thinking about Wittgenstein and writing about Wittgenstein. And then
I see.
Another philosopher called Kripke, Kripke, who in my opinion is one of the most important philosophers of the 20th century.
I see.
It's a little bit tricky to explain in a soundbite exactly why he's so important. But he really is. And he's also extremely readable. So if you want to find out about Kripke, the thing to do is to get hold of his book, Naming and Necessity. And even someone that's not really done much philosophy can start reading that book and can make some sense of it. It's a really interesting book about how words function, how language functions, and Kripke thinks these things through and comes to some pretty exciting conclusions that completely overturned mainstream philosophical opinion in the mid 1970s. I mean, views that people had held for thousands of years, literally. He showed that they were wrong. So, very important philosopher. And I'm just about to write something on Kripke, funnily enough, for Eon magazine, just explaining why he's so important. So Kripke and Wittgenstein.
Well, great. So we could conclude that you are you're more an analytical way than the continental philosophers, yeah.
Well, yes. If you want to use those labels, I would. I would definitely be put into the analytic camp.
I see.
Yeah.
I'm
not very keen on that distinction. But
I see.
But people are going to put me in the analytic box.
I see.
Yeah.
Yeah. Unfortunately, here in Indonesia, there's still not much acknowledgements about Kripke, Wittgenstein. Yeah, we're here too much continental way of philosophizing here in Indonesia. But anyway, thank you for your personal info. Okay, let's dig in your Stephen.
Sure.
Yeah. So let's go to the. Guys, we want to talk about one of Stephen books, very short introductions to humanism. And if there's any questions, please, here it is. Yeah, hopefully we could buy here in Indonesia in Kinokuk, I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe it's
So since I've read it, so I may not be able to remember what I think about this, but I'll try.
It's okay. So let's begin the first questions. So what is humanism? I mean, is it some kind of religious doctrine or what? And I think, what is humanism? Yeah, maybe that is the first question. What is humanism for you?
Okay. Well, the very short answer is that it's atheism plus some other beliefs. So humanists don't believe in God. But there's more to humanism than atheism. You can be an atheist without being a humanist. What are the extra things that humanists believe? Well, they are very often committed to and interested in moral issues. So you find them campaigning on various moral issues and also political issues. They're very interested in what's often called the separation of church and state. It's also sometimes called political secularism. So the word secular gets used in different ways. So sometimes it just means not religious, okay? But humanist secularists, or secular humanists, they're sometimes called in America, they think that the state should be neutral when it comes to religion. So the state should not punish religion or suppress religion like you find in totalitarian atheist states like Stalin's Russia or Mao's China. So humanists are very much in favor of defending freedom of thought and expression when it comes to religion. But it's also important to them that you can be free to criticize and reject religion also. So freedom of thought and expression should be extended to criticism of religion. So there should be no privilege for religion either. The state shouldn't give a special platform to religious beliefs. The state shouldn't fund religious schools. The state should simply provide a level, equal playing field for religious and non-religious beliefs and be neutral between all of the different competing religions and non-religion. The state should keep out of that domain. There should be a separation of church and state. This is a very important principle to humanists. And often when they campaign politically, their campaigns focus on this issue that in my country, the UK, for example, the state funds religious schools, a great many religious schools, hundreds and hundreds of them, and religious figures, bishops, automatically get to sit in part of our system of government in the House of Lords, and they have influence and power just because they're religious. It's a very unusual situation, actually. And so humanists in the UK campaign to prevent religious schools being privileged in that way and religious leaders being privileged in that way. So that's often when you see humanism in the media on television being discussed or in newspaper articles, it's because humanists are concerned about that kind of issue. So that's a little bit about humanism. It's atheism, but it's atheism plus other commitments, including certain moral commitments and political secularism. We believe that you can have a meaningful life in the absence of God and religion. And also humanists emphasize the importance of thinking for yourself and making your own judgment and not just accepting what tradition or authority tells you to accept. So humanists would be against a totalitarian atheist regime that told everyone they had to be atheists. That's not humanism. But then humanists would also be against a religious totalitarian regime that told everyone they had to adopt a particular religion. Humanists would be against that too. So they very much stress the importance of getting young people, but certainly all of us, to think and take responsibility for our own moral judgments and beliefs, and not just hand responsibility over to some sort of religious or political figure.
Okay. So we need to clarify that humanist doesn't hate religion, but try to separate it between church, state, and state. Maybe there's a lot of misconception. I think so. We should clarify that humanist doesn't hate religion, but it doesn't have any special place in the state or in everything in the public sphere. Am I right?
Yes, that's exactly right. In fact, humanists, insofar as they're secularists, political secularists, want to protect religious freedom. And in fact, you find that there are religious people who are also political secularists. Many, many religious people also want the state separate from religion. They think it's a bad idea for religion and the state to merge together into one thing. They think that's a dangerous situation. Religious people think that too. So it's not just a sort of an atheist point of view, the political secularism. This appeals to many religious people, and there are very good arguments for keeping the two things separate and not privileging religious beliefs.
I see. And another questions following questions. Do you think a humanist must to be an atheist? I mean, like in history, we see like Desiderius Erasmus, or the other philosophers who also a humanist and also religious. What do you think about that statement?
Oh, well, what's confusing is that the word humanism is used in a number of different ways. So there is a very loose idea of humanism, on which it just means we should put human beings at the center of our thinking, moral thinking, and so on. And if that's what you mean by humanism, then there are plenty of religious humanists. Pope John Paul II called himself a humanist. He was using the word in that way. And that's perfectly okay. I mean, I don't object to people using the word in that way. But when you look at Humanists UK, Humanists International, the American Humanist Association, and so on, they are using the word humanist in a different way. There's this new way of using the word on which it's a kind of atheism plus a number of other commitments, such as political secularism. And that's a perfectly clear and well-established way of using the word humanism too now. It's a bit like the word bank. You know, it can mean a river bank, it can mean a financial institution. Meanings, it's fine. As long as we're clear about what we mean, there's not going to be a problem. That's a key thing to get clear. When I'm talking about humanism in this book, the very first thing I say is I mean what the British, Humanists UK,
Humanist UK,
what they mean by the word humanism. In America, you often find that people clarify the kind of humanism that we're talking about here by calling it secular humanism. But in Europe, they tend to just call it humanism. Okay, so that further confuses things. If you ask Humanists UK how we should talk about humanism, they just say, just use the word humanism. It's our word. It's clear. Stick to humanism. Whereas in America, they tend to say, you know, we should call it secular humanism to make it clearer.
I see.
I personally, I'm
Okay.
quite happy with humanism.
Yeah,
It's clear enough.
I get the points. Yeah, I get the points. Okay,
Yeah.
so let's go to the next questions. Yeah, just like what you say, what you're trying to to over in your book is some kind of humanism that which trying to say that God doesn't exist, or atheistic humanism. Why is it? What do you think is the most powerful argument for the non-existence of God? I mean, there are a lot of arguments like divine hidenness from G.L. Schellenberg, yeah, and maybe evolution or David Hume. But what do you think is the most or the strongest arguments for the non-existence of God? Is it your arguments, the awful God challenge, or what?
Well, I think probably most people who think about this question would say that the most powerful argument, or certainly one of the most powerful arguments against the existence of God, is what's known as the evidential problem of evil. So the problem is that whilst God might allow some pain and suffering and morally terrible behavior into the universe, if there's some good reason for it, so it can help us grow and develop or build our characters or whatever it might happen to be, maybe he's going to allow some evil, some pain and suffering and so on into the universe. But if we look around us, we find that there's so much that it's just not plausible that an all-powerful and all-good God would allow it. So, for example, human beings have been on this planet for the species Homo sapiens, to give us our Latin title. We've been here for 200,000 years. And for almost the entire period, 200,000 years, up until very, very recently, your chances of making it past your 5th birthday were around about 50%, right? It's only in the last 100, 200 years that we've got mortality rates. They were like this, and they just fell like off a cliff edge. So now you have a pretty good chance of becoming an adult if you're born. Whereas previously, for almost the entire history of human beings, 200,000 years of humanity, your chances of making it past your fifth birthday were not very good. And those children would have died horribly, painfully, and ask any parent that's lost a child, what's the worst thing they've ever experienced? And they'll tell you it's that. It's psychological pain and suffering too for the parents who are helpless and can't help their child. So my suggestion is that just that observation provides very, very good evidence that if there is some kind of all-powerful creator in charge of the universe, he's not supremely benevolent. There may be some other kind of creator back there, but he's not all-powerful and all-good. An all-good God could not conceivably have a good reason to slaughter half of all human children for over 200,000 years. It seems to me this is pretty good evidence against the existence of God. So that's called the evidential problem of evil. And, you know, it's a pretty serious problem. And of course, it's not just humans suffering. There's been hundreds of millions of years of pain and suffering and death, appalling, beyond our imagination, really, before we human beings have even shown up. So I personally think it's pretty obvious that this universe, even if it is the creation of some kind of intelligence, it's not the creation of an all-powerful and supreme benevolent intelligence.
Okay, thank you. It's really, yeah, it's really great. Yeah. Also, can we know about your arguments, the evil God challenge? I think that's really interesting arguments. Yeah.
Well, it's my evil God challenge is just a way of getting people to think about this problem of evil in a slightly different way. So if you present people with the evil that we see in the world, they're trying to explain it away in various ways. So they'll say, oh, God created the suffering to build our characters, give us opportunities to help each other, and so on. Or they may say, well, just because we can't think of a reason why God would create all of this pain and suffering doesn't mean that there isn't a good reason. Maybe there is a good reason, and we're just too dim to think of what that reason might be. And they think that now they have dealt with the problem, okay, of evil. They can either explain it away in terms of character building and so on, or they can put it to one side because there could easily be a good reason for it, even if we don't think there is. But now, so the evil God challenge is this. It turns out that you can, just as you can consider a good God, you can consider the possibility of there being an evil God who is all-powerful and supremely, not benevolent, supremely malevolent, right? His cruelty and malice know no bounds. There's just one God, not two. One God, all-powerful and supremely malevolent. Now, who takes that seriously? Nobody. It's absurd, right? Why is it absurd? Most people say there's too much good stuff. All right, there's rainbows and laughter and love and ice cream, right? Too much good stuff for this to be the creation of a supremely powerful and malevolent deity. But that's just the mirror problem, right? If you believe in a good God, you have to explain the evil. If you believe in an evil God, you have to explain the good, right? And they think that the good is good evidence against an evil God, but they don't think that the evil is good evidence against the good God. Why is that? Well, because they can explain away the evil, they think, right? But you can explain away the good. So, for example, you might think that you might try and explain why God gives us good things by pointing out that those good things allow for greater evils, right? God gives us ice cream, but the ice cream makes us fat. And the ice cream, so, tempts us and we become depressed and we feel that we've done a bad thing because we've eaten the entire tub of ice cream. It's a way of torturing us, giving these good things. He gives us fit, healthy young bodies for about 10 years, and then he takes them away, and he makes your body old and decrepit and smelly and painful and so on. So that's so much more cruel than if he did given you the old decrepit body to begin with. So you can begin to see that actually we can explain away in just the same way that we explain away the evils, we can explain away the goods. And if you don't like the explanations, well, we can say, well, maybe there is a good reason for God, evil God, to give us many goods, all these goods, rainbows and ice cream and so on. It's just that we can't think of what that reason is. Show a little humility. This is you. You're just a human being. This is the mind of God, right? Evil God. There could easily be reasons for the evils that we just don't understand. So the goods that we just don't understand. Evil reasons for the goods that we just don't understand. So you can see that you can run the same arguments on either side, and yet still people think belief in a good God is, hey, that's reasonable. Belief in an evil God, no, that's ludicrous, right? Why? The same arguments apply, right? So you have to explain why a belief in a good God is so much more reasonable than belief in an evil God. They're not actually, they're about the same. They're both pretty ludicrous beliefs. Maybe there's some intelligence behind the universe, but it's neither all good nor all evil, so far as I can see. You may not know why the universe exists. I don't know why the universe exists, but I'm pretty damn sure it's not created by an evil God. And so, so all of you, you know that for sure, right? And if you can know that for sure, then you can know for sure that it's not the creation of an all good God either.
I see. Okay, I get a point there. I know that you don't believe in evil God, but you're trying to show how absurd to think about the existence of God. Yeah.
It's an analogy, yeah. So if you think that belief in an evil God is really low down on the scale of reasonableness, well, then the onus is very much on you to explain why you've put good God so much higher, right? Halfway up, at least, the scale of reasonableness. That's not an absurd belief, but this is like believing in fairies or Santa Claus. No, belief in God is much more reasonable than that. But is it actually? Maybe not.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Maybe we should go into the next question. So, okay, for the third questions, you have answered and you have shown maybe that we have killed God. So, the fourth questions is: humanists believe in right or wrong, and or good or evil, or good or evil. How do humanists know about good or evil without referring to the existence of God? Can someone knows what is good or what is evil without the existence of God? I mean, like, like C.S. Lewis said, if there is no objective, there is an objective morality and there is God. So, what a humanist think about this point?
Well, it's quite complicated because there are three separate issues that we need to tease out. So people get them muddled up. So one is, could there be objective morality if there is no God, right? How could it exist? Surely, in order for there to be some objective standard of right and wrong, well, there must be a God who either is that standard or who lays that standard down objectively. So there's that kind of objection. And then there's the concern that, well, how do humanists get to know what's right and wrong if they're not going to get it from some sort of religious holy book or some guru or religious leader, right? There's the question of moral knowledge. Where does that come from? And then a third issue is, will humanists and atheists be good in the absence of religion? Now, these are three separate questions, and they have very different answers. The final question, will atheists be good in the absence of religion? The answer is pretty clearly yes. I don't go around. There's really no evidence at all to support the view that in the absence of religious belief and belief in God, people are going to behave in a morally terrible way. There's just no good evidence to support that at all. We know, looking back at history, and we know looking at surveys of countries around the world, that religiosity and morality, right, are not, they don't come as a package. You're not required to have both of them. There are some currently across the West, the morally healthiest societies, the countries that have also that are healthiest in terms of things like sexually transmitted disease and murder and corruption and so on. The countries that do best are the least religious countries, not the most religious countries. Canada, Scandinavia, Japan, really healthy. America, other more religious countries, not so much. Okay, so the idea that you need religion in order to have a stable, healthy, moral population, it's not true. This brings us to the question of moral knowledge and where that comes from. Well, actually, we all have to rely on our own internal sense of what is right and what is wrong, inevitably. it is in part, we now know, a product of our evolution. We have evolved to some extent to be moral beings. We're all, unless we're psychopaths, we're all thinking about morality, concerned about morality. There's no society on earth, whether it be theist or not, where you don't find people reflecting on moral issues and moral questions who don't think that it's important. So it's a universal trait of human beings. When religions come along and say, no, 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 you need my special book to tell you what's right and wrong, right? Without the book, well, there can be no moral knowledge. The problem there is that, well, how do you know which book it is that's the correct, that's God's book, right? And how do you know how to interpret the book correctly, right? If the book tells you to go and do some terrible thing, barbecue children and eat them, right? Will you do what this book says? No. Of course you won't. Even if somebody says, but this is God's book, you have to, he wrote this one, you have to do it, right? You'll know because of your own internal sense of what's right and what's wrong, that this is not to be trusted, okay? So at the end of the day, it comes down to you as an individual to make moral judgments. And you cannot actually offload responsibility onto religious leaders or, in a communist society, political leaders to tell you what's morally right and wrong. And then you just blithely do whatever they command you to do. That is not morality. That's a recipe for disaster, actually. You need to apply your own sense of right and wrong, which we've all got. And insofar as you're doing that, then you don't need to rely on any religious book. I mean, it's worth thinking about religious and other points of view and reading other people, philosophers, religious people and so on, to find out what they think, because you might learn something. I'm not saying it's without value, reading the Bible or whatever it may happen to be, but ultimately we all have to rely on our own moral sense of what's right and wrong, and it's never an excuse if you've done something terrible to say, but my religious leader, my religious book told me that that's the right thing. That doesn't get you out of jail, and that doesn't get you off the hook so far as morality is concerned. You should know better, right? That's what we think. And if that's what we think, it's because we know that you have a standard of morality that is independent of any religious book or tradition. So that brings us to the final issue, which is, can you have objective morality independently of God? This is a really big, interesting question. I mean, it's very difficult to do it justice in a couple of minutes, really. But suffice to say that outside of religious circles, you just don't find philosophers giving much credence to the thought that in the absence of God, there can be no objective morality. I mean, it's an interesting question whether or not morality is objectively there or not. And, I'm not entirely sure, to be honest. But it seems to me that introducing God doesn't really help make it more objective. There is the famous Euthyphro dilemma, which seems to show that if, I don't know whether those watching are familiar with it, but very quickly, the Euthyphro dilemma is this. It says, to those people who say morality comes from God in the sense that God lays down what's right and wrong in the form of commands. You will do this. You won't do that, right? And then morality consists in obeying those commands. Plato, back in ancient Greece, famously asked the question, but hang on a minute, why does God command these things and command us not to do those things? Are these things right or wrong independently of what God commands, or is God's commanding it what makes it right or wrong? And neither of those answers is very satisfactory, because if God is commanding us not to do things because it's independently wrong to do those things, then God is no longer required. I mean, it's independently wrong, right? We atheists can help ourselves the same independent standard of right and wrong. We don't need God to come in and command us because it's wrong anyway, and we can figure that out. Or if it's the command that makes it right or wrong, well, then that means that if God had commanded us to barbecue children and eat them, then that would be the right thing to do. And that doesn't sound right either, does it? I mean, that's just wrong, irrespective of what God commands. But if God's commands make things right or wrong, well, then God could have commanded us to eat children, and that would have been morally the right thing to do. That just doesn't sound correct either. So the divine command theory famously runs into that problem. There are ways in which you can try and get around this problem, but it just illustrates some of the difficulties that you get into when you try and make morality depend on God in that way. You know, it's a big thorny question, and I'm simplifying a bit, and there are all sorts of ways in which theists respond, but on the face of it, it's not obvious why you need God to have morality. There are interesting questions about whether you can, whether morality ultimately is objectively out there, because it doesn't seem to be part of the furniture of the universe in the way that mountains and trees and bricks and so on are objectively out there. And it's difficult to understand, what kind of reality morality has outside of our own heads. But, these are interesting and important philosophical questions. I don't know the answers to all of them, but I don't see that introducing God is terribly helpful. One of the things that God, just going off on a slight tangent, one of the things you can do with God is the kind of a universal Swiss Army knife. Does everything you want him to do. If you've got an invisible being with magical powers, you can answer any question and solve any puzzle, right? Suppose I want to know how my keys got on the mantelpiece when I was sure that I left them on the chair. I may say, I don't know, it's a mystery. Somebody else comes in and says, I can explain that. You see, there are gremlins in your house. They're invisible, and they love to cause mischief, and they move the keys, and that's why they've ended up on the mantelpiece. Now, the person who introduces the invisible being with the magical powers can always explain, right, anything that is otherwise a mystery to me. But that doesn't really give me a good reason to believe in gremlins, does it? I mean, that would be a pretty poor reason to believe in gremlins. Well, similarly, God, where did the universe come from? I don't know. What explains morality? Good question. Why do we appear to have a fine-tuned universe? I don't really know. What accounts for the necessity of necessary truths? This is another really good. I've got the answer to all of these questions. You see, God. God has magical powers. He's an invisible being. He created the universe. He fine-tuned it. He creates morality, blah, 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 blah. Invisible beings with magical powers. That's where we go to when we're puzzled. It's not usually the right answer.
Okay, I got your points. Thank you for it's really brief because to talk about it, I think we need more sessions to talk about how a theist thinks about morality, but it's really explaining. Okay, so that's about morality and humanist. Let's go to the next questions about the society, the political aspects of humanism. So how do humanists see politics on societies? Do you think secularism is the best ideas out there? I think is it hard to some countries, i.e. some Near Eastern countries, India, etc., and even in Indonesia here. I mean, there's Meski out here. A lot of fundamentalists is here, and I think it's still hard to make some places, some countries to be or to adopt secularism. What do you think about it?
Well, I'm obviously in favour of political secularism, and one reason I'm in favour of it is it's a matter of fairness. It's a matter of the state treating everyone equally and not privileging these people and suppressing or persecuting those people. It's about fairness and giving everyone an equal platform and an equal voice and so on. So you can give a fairness kind of argument for political secularism. You can also give a sort of pragmatic, practical argument. Political secular societies are very successful in avoiding internal conflict. very often you find that in countries that have different religious perspectives, and they're not secular, one will attempt to gain power and control the state, and then there will be a violent overthrow of those religious people by these religious people who will then suppress that religion and try and control the state. And there's this constant battle between individuals to try and grab hold of the levers of power so that they have control. If you live in a political secular society, it protects you all. Everyone's protected. No one needs to grab the levers to try and protect themselves anymore. So there's a practical case for saying that it's going to reduce violence. It's going to reduce, if this religion wants to peacefully practice its religion over there, go ahead. No one's going to stop you. If these people over there want to practice their religion, go ahead. No one's going to stop you. The state will protect them from being persecuted, protect their freedom to worship and express their religious beliefs, but it will also protect the atheists and others who are critical of those religious beliefs. It's going to protect everyone equally. That, it seems to me, practically speaking, is probably the best arrangement if you want to avoid religious conflict.
It's still way far here in Indonesia, because even we have some kind of minister of religion here. It's interesting to talk about political secularism. I think it's really compelling, and hopefully one day here also it could be happen. So to the next questions. Okay, we have talked about morality and society or politics. Now let's go to the third, or maybe the last. What about the meaning of life? If there is nothing transcendence out there, like the existence of God, could there be a meaning of life? Could be like if there's no religion or no transcendence being, maybe everyone is in the state of existential crisis, like, well, what the meaning of life, what happened next, and etc. etc. So seems like we are all Sisyphus who rolls the same rock every day. What do you think about the meaning of life in the perspective of humanism?
Well, I think obviously we don't think that life is made meaningful by virtue of there being a God who we have been made created to praise, and we get an afterlife if we praise him and do the right things. Obviously, that we don't think that that's what makes your life meaningful. And generally speaking, if someone has been created for a purpose, particularly a purpose where they have to love some other person and praise them and so on, that we wouldn't normally consider that a way of making a life meaningful. If I create a child to love me, and that's their purpose, as far as I'm concerned, I don't see why that gives their life meaning. It doesn't. If anything, I'm stripping meaning from their life. I'm not giving it to them. Similarly, then, why does God making me to love him, why is that a relationship with giving my life meaning? I don't get it. It's not clear to me why it does that. You might conclude that then life doesn't have a meaning. Possibly, mind you, if it's true that nothing really matters, life is meaningless and nothing matters, then it doesn't matter that nothing matters. It's worth remembering that. It doesn't matter that nothing matters. However, it seems to me that things still matter a lot to us. Certainly things matter to me. We all share, unless we're psychopaths or sociopaths, we have similar concerns. We want to see other human beings flourish. We want to live in a society that's reasonably fair and just and so on. We all want these things. And we all strive to create these things. And some of us make very big contributions. And it seems to me that given that perspective, those people have led very decent and meaningful lives, often very selfless lives. The religious person that does something good because they're expecting a reward in heaven, it seems to me that person is far less praiseworthy than the atheist that lays down their life for others, knowing they're going nowhere afterwards. There is no life after death. They're just doing it anyway because they know they feel it's the right thing to do and they want to help other people. I would consider that a very noble, existence, very noble life. If people are pursuing their lives, helping others, I think that's about as meaningful existence as you can get. And I'm not quite sure why introducing some super cosmic being in the sky, as it were, who creates everything and has designed it all that way for some reason, really makes it any more meaningful. It's about as meaningful as I would want to expect it to be.
I see. Yeah, I got the points. Yeah. So yeah, we don't need any transcendence to give us meaning. Yeah. Okay.
No.
Stephen, yeah, I want to go to the last questions. Yeah, maybe
Okay.
it seems like an evangelical one, but why do you think someone should be a humanist?
Why?
Yeah.
Well, I think that they should be a political secularist because it's the most just arrangement, and pragmatically, it's very, it works. Everyone feels secure. It makes for a healthy, flourishing society. But that's the reason to be a political secularist, not necessarily a humanist, because even a religious person can be a political secularist, even someone that believes in God. So I'd also need to give you a reason to be an atheist. And my reason for that I would give you is that it's true. Atheism is true. I would prefer people believe what's true.
I see.
And in fact, we know that religion in particular has a gobsmacking ability to get even smart, intelligent people, smarter and more intelligent than me, right, to believe completely ludicrous things. So, for example, in the United States of America, around about a third to a half of all Americans, including some extremely intelligent people, many college educated, they believe the entire universe is 6,000 years old because that's what it says in their holy book. That's pretty impressive, right? The ability of religions to get people to believe really bizarre and things is quite amazing. And that power is potentially extremely destructive. So, religions can exist quite peacefully and not do anyone any harm, a bit like nuclear power, right? You can have a nuclear power station and everything, it ticks away, produces good things, energy, and everything's fine. But you have to remember that if it goes wrong, it's going to go very wrong indeed, very quickly. And so you and if you could do without it, that actually, if there was some other way of having power without the risk, that would be better. Similarly, then, religions are often very benign. They have their upside. On balance, though, I would prefer it if there were no such thing, given that I know that religions are also potentially extremely destructive. Potentially, they have the ability to mobilize people into killing machines and set them against each other in very violent ways. And although most of the time that's not what's going on, that potential is a concern that I have about religion. And it is a kind of peculiar feature of religion. I know atheists can be mass murdering a-holes too, but it seems to me that religion does pose a particular threat in terms of getting large numbers of people, including very well-educated people, to believe really very strange things. But, religion will never go away. I suspect we're hardwired to be religious. I want to be tolerant of religion. I want to respect the beliefs of religious people. I want to protect their freedom to worship in whichever way they want to. And as long as they're not hurting other people or restricting the rights and freedoms of other people, they can do what they like, as far as I'm concerned.
Okay, thank you, Stephen. Maybe that's the questions that I want to ask for you. Can we take one or two questions from the audiences?
Okay.
Okay, Reinhard, are there any questions at Slido?
Oh yeah, there's a lot of questions, man.
Yeah, maybe we could take
have
two
you
questions.
have you seen?
Yeah.
Okay, you want me to choose that?
Yeah, please. Thank you.
Okay, so I'll just pick the best question that I could see. In a second.
Reinhard, we couldn't hear you. Yeah. Okay.
Hello.
Okay. Yeah.
Can you hear
Nice.
me?
Yeah. Nice.
Okay. Take that one. This is a question from, I don't know who, anonymous. It says, as a humanist, do you think that religion degrades humanity development? For example, that the LGBTQ plus rights are denied or hindered because of Christianity? That's one.
Okay. Can you just repeat it? Because I didn't quite hear it.
Okay.
Yeah. Reinhard.
I will repeat the question. As a humanist, do you think that religion degrades humanity development? For example, LGBTQ plus rights are denied or hindered because of Christianity?
Well, that's a good question, and it's not really a question you should ask a philosopher, really, because I'm an armchair thinker. You know, I just think in the abstract, and whereas this is a question about how things play out in the real world. You know, is Christianity having a positive or a negative effect in terms of, you know, respecting people's rights or oppressing people and so on? And things have obviously changed over the centuries. And there's no doubt that Christianity in the past has been extremely oppressive, violently oppressive. The situation, on the other hand, it's also worth remembering that Christians have used Christianity to justify doing really great things, really good things. You know, Wilberforce famously argued against slavery, and part of his case for that was a religious Christian case. So I don't, you know, it swings and roundabouts. I think that religion sometimes can be used in a positive way, and sometimes in a negative way. The main problem I've got about religious justifications is that they're not true. So I would prefer, you know, if we're going to argue for the abolition of slavery, I would prefer not to refer to the Bible, because for one thing, nowadays very many people don't believe in the Bible anymore. So that argument is not going to carry any weight with them. So it certainly would be better if you could come up with an argument that could be run independently of relying on religious texts and religious authorities and so on. But there's no doubt that religion has been used to justify doing things that were in fact very good things. I don't know if I've answered your question.
Okay.
Second questions, Reinhard?
Okay.
Second questions, yeah.
You want to choose that, or you want me to choose it?
Whatever. Yeah. Please
Okay.
choose which one do you think is the most important to us.
Okay, so I've got the question about
The sound, suara.
Hello? Can you hear me?
Reinhard, we couldn't. Yeah. Okay. Nice. Yeah, this is
Okay. Okay. Okay, I got this one is about Nietzsche.
No, I don't know.
So okay, so I think we'll proceed to the other one. It's about the other one is about human rights. It says, what is your current view on the Universal Declaration of Human Rights? Is it innately against the concept of God as the current objective of morality? I'm not really sure.
Again, I didn't. Can you repeat it? Because I didn't quite hear the question.
Iya, Reinhard, suara lu.
Okay. What is the current view on the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and is it innately against the concept of God as the current objective truth of morality?
Oh, gosh. Current view on the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, is it innately against the concept of God as the current objective of truth and morality? Why would you think that? I'm not quite sure why you would think that the Universal Declaration of Human Rights stands in opposition to the concept of God as, I mean, because you might think that the Universal Declaration of Human Rights just encapsulates a sort of divine perspective on things, really, that we're all made equally in God's image, and so we all deserve the same basic rights. You could argue for the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in a very God-friendly religious way, it seems to me. So I'm not sure why they would be necessarily in opposition.
Okay.
I think that's my answer. It's the best I can come up with, sorry.
Can I ask one more question, Sam?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's great. Kita lanjut ke yang Romo Joni aja nih. Ini there's an interesting one from Joni. Joni. Please read it. Let me read it, ya, Reinhard. I'll read it for Stephen.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. The evil God. Yeah.
About the evil God.
This one is interesting.
Yeah. No, it's an interest. In fact, if you read my paper, The Evil God Challenge, you'll see that it actually contains a response to that point. If you're interested, you can find my paper online for free in all sorts of places. My argument doesn't, well, this question is about the privation view of evil, okay, which is a particular religious view of the nature of evil that is not universally accepted by religious people. I mean, I know various religious people who reject it, okay, and I don't know anyone who isn't religious who accepts the privation view of evil. So it's a very specific religious view about evil. And the view is that evil is sort of absence, or better, a privation of good. So if we were to think of an evil like blindness, lack of sight, that's an absence of something that should be there. So in me, if I can't see, that's a privation. I should be able to see. Being a human being, we're supposed to have sight. Sight is absent, that's an evil. Bricks, on the other hand, are, you know, they're not supposed to have sight. So there's no evil in a brick lacking sight. So evils are privations of good. Now, this is a very extremely controversial view about the nature of evil. There are obvious, I mean, first of all, we might ask why on earth we should suppose that that's true. And on the face of it, there appear to be counterexamples. I mean, from this, you could argue that in some cases, it depends, the plausibility of the view depends very much on the cases that you choose to focus on. So in the case of blindness, you might think that blindness looks like a privation of sight, that's why it's an evil. But on the other hand, when we think about, I don't know, peace, well, that's an absence of war and strife and so on. So that's a good that consists in the absence of things. So you see, good is an absence of evil. Which of these two views is correct? I don't think either of them are. I don't think either of them are. But let's just suppose that the first one is correct, that evil is an absence of good. Then you could argue that the very idea of an evil God makes no sense, because if evil is a privation or an absence, then, you know, and the universe, evil in the universe consists of holes, if you like in a big Swiss cheese, then an evil God would be all hole and no cheese. I mean, there'd be nothing there. It's the idea of an evil God is incoherent if evil is a privation of good. So you could try and run that argument. That doesn't really deal with the evil God challenge, though. I don't think. Well, it depends what you understand the challenge to be. I mean, what we may have done there is perhaps, if this very particular religious view that not even all Christians accept about evil, if that were true, then it may be that the very idea of an evil God makes no sense. Of course, some people think the very idea of a good God makes no sense either. For other reasons, there are lots of logical objections to God. The idea that there's a person that is also the creator of time and space. How could that doesn't make any sense, right? I mean, because a person is a temporally located being. You can't have a person outside of time and space. Persons have beliefs and desires. These have temporal duration. The very idea of a person that creates time makes no sense. But anyway, let's suppose that's a terrible argument and that there really is a particular problem with the idea of an evil God, but no such problem with the idea of a good God. My concern is this, that we would rule out an evil God anyway, notwithstanding the fact that there is some logical problem with an evil God. We would, on the basis of looking around us and seeing the love, the laughter, the ice cream and the rainbows, we would quite reasonably rule out an evil God anyway. And if that's true, then the challenge remains, well, then why don't we rule out a good God on the basis of all of the pain and suffering that we see around us? If one of these objections is good, then the other objection is good too, okay? You're merely pointing to some other objection that could be raised against an evil God, which possibly it could. It's very contentious. But even if it could, the fundamental question remains, why are we ruling out one God on the basis of observation of the world around us, irrespective of the logical problem, but not the other? Surely we should treat each hypothesis in the same way. So that's how I respond in the paper. Which, I mean, maybe that's not a good response, but that's the one I present in the paper.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for the clear. And I think if anyone wants to know more, yeah, am I right? Yeah, has debated William Lane Craig some years ago, and the video has been uploaded to YouTube. Yeah. The Evil God Challenge. I think, yeah, that's a great debate, I think, personally. Okay, question. I mean, it's almost an hour. Thanks a lot, Stephen. It's really spent an hour here in our little community of philosophy. Do you want to make a closing remarks?
Well, I think the signal is getting weak again, maybe. But if you can hear me, I would just want to say thank you, because it was a very interesting conversation. Yep. The questions were really excellent all the way through. So thank you. It was good fun, and you made it very easy. So, and also I very much appreciate your promoting philosophy. You know, where you are too. I think that's a really important and good thing. Getting people to think. Getting people to question what they might otherwise just take for granted. This is a very important activity. It's what philosophers do. And so it's very valuable that you're promoting that where you are too. So I thank you for doing that. Can you hear me? Maybe not.
Thank you so much. And also announcements. Hopeful. Yeah. Hello. Yeah. Sorry. My connection is a bit bad. Yeah. Yeah. So announcements. October 9th, we still discuss with William Lane Craig himself to come here and to also talk in our discussion, and maybe it's to have William Lane Craig also, hopefully. Anyway, Amadea, ada me and Amadia are the ones who makes the who initiate this hub community
Hello,
community
sir.
thing.
I think that's enough. And thank you very much, sir, for your willing. And this discussion is so insightful for us in Indonesia.
Well, thank you. It was fun, and keep it going. Keep the philosophy going. It's good.
Okay, everyone. I think that it is. Stephen, thank you once again. I think you guys could leave the room discussions, and I hope one day we could have another talk with you, Stephen.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Okay, I'll end this discussion. Okay. Thank you, everyone.